This is CJ Stroud, starting quarterback of the Houston Texans, and he is shattering all expectations. He could very well be the franchise quarterback the Texans have been waiting for. And although he is only 4 games into his NFL career, he has already shown he is a very good quarterback. I can barely believe I'm saying this because I'm not even a Texans fan, but he has legitimately made the Texans fun to watch. I mean it, if you're not watching Texans football, you need to change that. The Texans are a fun team to watch again. And CJ Stroud just has everything from his confidence, his poise in the pocket, his leadership, his pinpoint accuracy. I mean, I watch him play and it's so easy to forget he's a rookie quarterback, barely even into his career, because he looks like a veteran out there. Before getting into all the impressive things he's done so far this season, it's important to provide some context for the situation CJ Stroud joined. So it's no secret the last few years for the Texans have been bleak, to say the least. It's crazy to see the direction this team took over the last few years, especially because just back in 2018, the team had a very good year. They went 10-6. They had what appeared to be their franchise quarterback in Deshaun Watson. They end up winning a playoff game. They go into Kansas City. They find themselves up 24-0 on what would be the eventual champs that year. And it was all downhill from there. Not just in the game, which they would end up losing, but then in the offseason, they would lose some players. They would trade away their star wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, and it felt like the beginning of the end. Because then JJ Watt would have some issues, Deshaun Watson would also face some off-the-field issues and eventually get traded away to the Cleveland Browns. They would go 4-12 that year. Their head coach and GM at the time, Bill O'Brien, would get fired. The next year wasn't much better under new head coach David Culley. He would only last a year as they would go 4-13 and he would be fired. And then last year under coach Lovie Smith, they would go 3-13-1 and he also would be fired. However, they would get the 2nd overall pick, leading into this situation that they find themselves in now. But after years of just what I could imagine was hard football to watch, they would sign their new head coach, DeMeco Ryans, to a long-term deal, and there seemed to be a lot of newfound excitement. DeMeco Ryans is beloved in Houston. He had some great seasons coaching that 49ers defense, and it seemed like he could be the catalyst to build something big, but I don't think even he expected CJ Stroud to be as big of a success as he was. So after securing the person they thought would be their head coach of the future, now it was time to secure their quarterback of the future. And of course, that's a lot harder said than done because not only do you have to find the right guy, but you also have to hope that the Carolina Panthers, who have that number 1 pick, don't take the guy that you want. Now, for the most part, there were really only 3 to 4 guys to choose from. These would be CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and someone who gained a lot of pre-draft hype, Will Levis. However, it seems that GMs didn't quite share that media hype because he would end up going in the 2nd round. So really, for all intents and purposes, there were 3 guys to choose from. Now, the Panthers would take Bryce Young at 1. And the Texans would select their guys CJ Stroud at 2, and by all accounts it seemed that they were really happy with this pick, that was the guy that they always wanted. CJ Stroud actually became the highest drafted Ohio State quarterback. I do want to make a quick note that Anthony Richardson, who was taken 4th, has also been playing incredibly well. But of course this video is focusing on CJ Stroud, who I think is having the best rookie season so far. Now CJ Stroud was a very good college quarterback. In his 25 games as the Ohio State starter, he won 21 of them. He won the Buckeyes the 2021 Rose Bowl and would play in the 2022 College Football Playoff semifinals. He was also a 2-time Heisman finalist in his 2 years. He completed 69.3% of his pass attempts for 8,123 yards, 85 touchdowns, with only 12 interceptions in his 2 years. These are all very good numbers, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of the common criticisms for Ohio State quarterbacks, but really quarterbacks that come from some of the biggest colleges, is that they're never really challenged in college football because their receivers are always so open in comparison to what they'll face in the pros, and there's usually a big talent discrepancy between their team and the ones that they face. So it is a common criticism, especially among Ohio State quarterbacks, that they don't really pan out in the pros. So that was something the Texans had to consider when evaluating him. To add to this, many around the league and media had concerns about Stroud after news of his allegedly poor results in the S2 cognition test ran rampant in sports media. Now, for anyone who doesn't know this S2 cognition test, it's basically a way to measure a player's reactivity in different learning landscapes, as well as their ability to process and improvise, which are things that a quarterback definitely needs to be good at. Taking in information really fast, analyzing it, perhaps improvising at the line of scrimmage and different things like that. Of course, it's really hard to be a quarterback, you don't need me to tell you that. But CJ Stroud scored really low on this test, especially in comparison to the other two quarterbacks who were considered in that top class. For context, Bryce Young scored in the 98th percentile, Richardson in the 79th percentile, and Stroud all the way down at the 18th percentile. And when CJ Stroud was asked about his low test score, he had this to say: "I'm not a test taker, I play football." These words could not be more true, and honestly, it seems like this test is largely overrated. You would actually assume from the way that the guys had performed that who scored the highest to the lowest was actually reversed, because Bryce Young out of these three has looked the worst. And in the NFL, it's all about what you can produce on the field, not what you can do on a test. But I do think that the media went a little too far with how this test impacted their draft day analysis, because some even went so far as to basically imply that this meant he was dumb and he wasn't prepared for the position. So CJ Stroud would have a lot of pressure going into the season, because if it didn't work out, he would have these test scores where people could point to them and say, "You see, he performed low on the test. I could have predicted he would have performed badly in the NFL." Or the moment he faced some adversity, it would be easy to point to those test scores and say, "You see, he doesn't have what it takes to process at this level." And going into the preseason, he would battle it out with the other Texans quarterback Mills, and would eventually win the starting role. He would even be named a team captain. But now we get into week 1 of the regular season, where he would be facing a lot of pressure. I think most people didn't really have much expectations for the Houston Texans. This is a team that went 3-13-1 last year. I don't think anyone was expecting them to be very competitive this year. But CJ Stroud would have a lot of pressure on him, more so than I think his other quarterbacks because of those test scores. I really do think people would have pointed to those test scores if things went even a little awry early on in his career. Because if he makes a bad play, it might just be a rookie mistake. But I followed this game long enough to know that people would criticize him and say, "You see, he doesn't process well." However, I'm not sure that even the biggest CJ Stroud fans could have predicted how good he would look in these first 4 weeks. So in the first game, they played the Baltimore Ravens, and they would end up losing 25-9. But overall, Texans players and coaches were impressed with their quarterback. As someone who watched the game, I was very impressed with him. I even thought he played a lot better than even his numbers showed. Also, I think it's important to factor in he's missing 4 out of his 5 starting offensive linemen. So to be thrown in your first NFL game against a very good Ravens team, a team with a defense that will get after you, and they did sack him 5 times, he really showed a lot of poise in the pocket. He didn't seem that overwhelmed by the situation, and week over week he's only gotten better and better, and this first week was still pretty good. He completed 28 of his 44 pass attempts for 242 passing yards and 20 rushing yards. He didn't throw a touchdown, but he also didn't throw an interception. But I think the craziest part about his first game is that his first pass was thrown and caught by himself. Yes, you heard that right. He both threw and caught his first pass. So what happened is he threw the ball, it was batted, and he ended up catching it. But as I mentioned, I was watching him saying he looks like a veteran quarterback out there. A lot of rookie quarterbacks, when they're facing that heavy pressure and their first read isn't there, they often bail the pocket. But he just stood there going through his reads, getting the ball out. And he was getting the ball out fast. In his passes thrown in under 2.5 seconds, he went 14 for 18 for 119 yards with a 94.2 passer rating in this game. So he was very accurate and fast at getting the ball out. So overall, his first game was good. He showed a lot of flashes, but I think it's the other games that really show that this guy is going to be special. Because in his second game, although he would end up losing to the Colts 31-20, he still put together a very impressive game which showed improvement on his week 1 performance. In the game, he completed 63.8% of his passes for 384 yards, which is a lot of yards for any quarterback in a game, let alone a quarterback in his second ever start. Not to mention, he had a lot working against him. He had the shaky offensive line missing 4 out of the 5 starters, leading him to be sacked half a dozen times. Not to mention, he was even dealing with a shoulder injury from earlier in the week. And their rushing attack was abysmal with only 52 yards and 26 carries, so only 2 yards a carry. So he had no help from the offensive line and from the rushing, so it was basically all on him. But even with this, he threw for 384 yards, not a single interception, and 2 touchdowns. This was the second most passing yards in franchise history by a rookie, trailing only Deshaun Watson. Of course, the Texans haven't had too many quarterbacks compared to other teams because they are still a relatively new team, but those are still great numbers. And if those 2 games weren't impressive enough in how he showed improvement and how he showed an incredible amount of poise in the pocket and ability to not make mistakes, his 3rd game was a masterpiece because he would secure his first win in his 3rd game, throwing for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns on the way to rolling the Jacksonville Jaguars 37-17. And the numbers, while they're good, they really don't show how good he was in this game. If you watch him play, he just looks so in control of every play. Like nothing phases him. He completed 67% of his throws that afternoon, and the Jaguars are a pretty good team. After 3 games, he had 906 passing yards, which is the 3rd most ever by a rookie quarterback in that span. And a smaller thing I also wanted to note is just how good his press conferences are. He seems so even keel. All of his press conferences show a great amount of leadership. He seems like he has the right temperament to be a leader of the team. But if that game wasn't good enough, at the time of making this video, CJ Stroud and the Texans just shocked the NFL world in his most recent game by destroying the Pittsburgh Steelers 30-6. Which was actually their first home win since December 26th, 2021. Yes, you heard that right, December 26th, 2021. It had been 644 days since the Texans had last won a game at home. And this was also their biggest win since 2017, winning by 24 points. The rookie quarterback threw for 306 yards in this game, 2 touchdowns, and not a single interception. He has not thrown an interception through 4 weeks. He doesn't even know what those are yet. So far they're 2-2 and they only have 1 fewer win than they got all of last year. He was making great plays all game, especially with a massive 52-yard touchdown pass. Currently he ranks 4th in the NFL with 1,212 passing yards, which is the 2nd most yards in NFL history by a rookie in his first 4 games. He has thrown 6 touchdown passes and set a rookie NFL record by making 151 pass attempts without an interception. Yes, he made NFL history. He seems to be getting better and better each game, which is crazy because he's already very good. He's also faced some tough defenses like the Steelers and the Ravens, and the Jaguars aren't bad either. Not to mention he's been missing 4 out of the 5 of his starting offensive linemen. He's been under constant pressure, but if you watch him, it almost seems like that doesn't bother him because he makes his reads, he has such great poise in the pocket, he gets the ball out fast without mistakes. He is not playing like a rookie quarterback, he's playing like a very good veteran right now. I know it's still early, but I truly believe the Texans have found a special quarterback. This is going to be their franchise guy. Also, it might be a hot take right now, but I already believe he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Borderline top 10, that's what I'm talking about right now. And that sounds crazy, but if you start listing them out and if you look at his numbers and watch him play, he plays like he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But I get it, people will probably be a little upset with that take. But while I'm also making hot takes, I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans make the playoffs this year. Look at their schedule and the way that they've been playing, it's really not that unrealistic anymore. This is supposed to be a team in a rebuilding year, and they're already pretty good, especially at the quarterback position. I think the future is incredibly bright for CJ Stroud and this Texans team, and I'm pretty excited to see it, and I'm not even a Texans fan. But what do you think about CJ Stroud? And if you like this kind of video and want to see more NFL related videos, please consider liking and subscribing for more, and thank you for watching.